All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar, which is all about goal setting. It's about productivity and how to get things done in this fast changing world. So this is part of my Disruption by Design coaching program. It's a leadership program that I offer to leaders who are looking at being more innovative and being able to manage this disruption and change. And every month I run a webinar for not just the leaders, but for their team members as well. So if you're here, it might be because you're part of the program, or it might be because I've invited you separately from the program. I'll tell you a little bit more about the program at the very end, but today we're going to talk about productivity and getting things done in a world that's changing fast. So we've got about 45 minutes together. If you're part of the Disruption by Design leadership program, then you'll also get a copy of the recording later. You'll have access to the recording. But if you haven't, if you're not a member of the program yet, then you won't get the recording. So please do take notes as we go along. So my three rules of engagement for all of my presentations. One, I'd like you to think. So this is a chance for you to do a little bit of thinking, think a little bit differently, think outside the box if you want to put it that way. For the next 45 minutes, avoid other distractions and get into today's webinar topic, but also be a bit playful as we go, because there'll be some opportunities for you to just try things a little bit differently. And for the next 45 minutes, be okay with just stretching yourself a little bit. And then if you want to, then you can walk yourself back afterwards. But I also want you to have something that you can take away and put into action. And today's webinar is very much about that. It's very much about action. It's very much about getting things done. So for people who don't know me, my name is Gihan Pereira. I'm a futurist, a conference speaker. I talk about disruption, change, leadership, and innovation. And I work with a number of organizations, and many of them have similar sort of issues, challenges, and opportunities when they're looking at the future. And I've got just a small sample of some of my clients here. And you can see some are for-profit organizations, some are government organizations, some not-for-profit. There are others that are big, some that are smaller, and we all seem to be facing this pending disruption. So there's change everywhere. So it's change is a new normal, and we all need to know how to be able to be able to deal with it. So today I want to talk about how you get goal setting done when the world's changing around you. So a couple of little interactive things to do to get started with. So I've got a couple of polls here to get started. So this first one is, when did you last achieve a significant goal in your personal life? I've got two questions here. One's about personal life, and the next one's going to be about your professional life. And what I'm looking for here are goals that you set. So you set a significant goal and you achieved it. So let me show this poll, and the way that the polls work for people who are new to this is, let me launch the poll, and you'll see this is completely anonymous, but you'll see the options up there, and I've made it very broad here. When did you last achieve a significant goal in your personal life? And just vote for one of the for one of those options. And when I get most people voting, then I'll close the poll and I'll show the results. Okay, good. Thank you for voting quickly. So I've got enough responses now. So let me share the results here. Okay, and it's kind of mixed, right? So we got about, if you think about 1/3 have done it in the past 3 months, which includes the last month, 1/3 in the past year, and about, let's say, a quarter more than a year ago. So interesting, right? So you achieve goals in your personal life. Great. Let me ask the same question with your professional life. So if I said to you now, exactly the same question, when did you last achieve a significant goal in your professional life? Let me run the second poll, and let's see how the answers look there. Okay, it's the same rules, just choose one of the options, and this is in your work life, in your professional life. Okay, again, thank you for the people who are voting quickly. Wow, that's really quick. Great. Okay, and make no comment about whether you're better at achieving goals in your personal life or your professional life here. When we'll see the results soon. In fact, we've got enough people voting now, so let me show the results. Right. Okay. So again, across the board, but again, there's many who've achieved them a bit further away. So there's 42% in the past year, and one third more than a year ago since you've last achieved a significant goal in your professional life. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is in this world that's changing really fast, how are you going to continue to achieve goals? And you can think about this for your professional life or your personal life, either way. And for the people that in my Disruption by Design coaching program, I'm going to suggest that you think about this for your professional life, because we're thinking about your work life here. Okay, so my third bit of interaction before we get into the content of today's webinar, this is a chance for you to actually type. So rather than you just answering in the question, answering a poll, what I'd like you to do is type in the question box, what gets in the way of you achieving important goals? And I'm going to read out the responses, but I will keep them anonymous. So I'll just read out what the responses are without saying who said them. So, for example, when I ask this question at my workshops, what gets in the way of achieving important goals? People say things like, oh, the goalposts get moved, or I lose motivation, or I get pushed off into another project, a different priority. Okay, so what gets in the way of you achieving important goals? So I'm going to just leave this open for a minute or so we can give you a bit of time for you to type. Okay, one response here says time. So I assume that's maybe not enough time to achieve the goals, like in your workday. Resistance from other parts of the business. Getting feedback. I'm not quite sure what that means. Is it that you're not getting enough feedback, or you're getting feedback that you don't need to do it anymore? Okay, lack of understanding of what I'm trying to achieve from management. Okay, so a bit of a theme here, right? So these are all about other people are getting in the way of achieving your goals, which, fair enough, that's okay. Yeah, so here, so another one here says not getting enough feedback along the way. That's interesting. Okay. Poor management, motivation is squashed. Goalposts move or disappear. Okay, so thank you for sharing those results. Feedback, time taken for staff to feedback. Okay. No permission from management to set innovative goals. And change, and the goalposts are moving. Okay, so thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. So here's what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is go through a process that will help you set goals, even in a fast-changing world. And the first important key to doing this is don't set 12-month goals anymore. Don't work on 12-month goals. Instead, what we're going to do is work on 90-day projects, so 3-month goals. So it's okay to have a theme for the 12 months, and you might have a big theme for what you want to achieve. And remember, this is for yourself, for your team, or your organization, but then break it down into 4 90-day projects. And then each of them, so 90-day projects is about 12 weeks. You can break them down into a 40-hour week, what you're going to achieve each week. And then you might have a to-do plan for each day. So 3 things that you want to achieve each day that will move you towards your goal. Today, we're going to focus on the 90-day projects. The reason I like 90-day projects is because 90 days is long enough to do something significant, but short enough that the world's not going to change around you. The problem with 12-month goals, which is the way we used to do goal setting, is that it's too long now. Things change so much in 12 months, and it's difficult to stay motivated. So you might start off with a couple of weeks where you're really motivated because you want to get your goal off to a great start, but then by week 4 or 5, you start to dawdle a bit, you go off focus, other things get in the way, and it's hard to stay motivated for 12 months. But with 90 days or 12 weeks, it's a much easier process because you can see it all in front of you. You can map out week by week by week what you need to do each week. You can't slack off in any week unless you've planned for slacking off, because then you know that you're going to fall behind. So what we're going to do is work on a 90-day project. So what I'd like you to do is, what's your 90-day project for this exercise? And I'm not asking you to share it. In fact, please don't share it, because I'd like you to keep this to yourself. But it'll help if, as we go through this process, you have a 90-day project in mind. For example, for me, my 90-day project, which I'm running, so with my business manager, Emma, who some of you know, in my business, our 90-day project is this one-day workshop, sometimes half day, sometimes one day, which is called the New Rules for High Performance Teams. What we want to do is get booked for this workshop in the next 90 days. And we've got some goals around how many bookings we want, how much income we want to earn from that. But that's the 90-day project. It doesn't mean that everything else stops, but this is the one focus for the next 90 days. So I'd like you to have your own as well. And kind of in a weird way. So in the one-day workshop, by the way, so one of the new rules for high-performance teams is to run 90-day projects. So one of the exercises I teach is specifically this, but there's a whole bunch of other things as well, just as an aside. Okay, so I hope you've got it. I'm not going to ask you to share it, but I hope you've got it and written it down, because you're going to use that as we work through 9 steps. So these are the 9 steps which come from this fantastic book by Dr. Heidi Grant Halverson called 9 Things Successful People Do Differently. And it's all about goal setting and success in a fast-changing world. And so what Dr. Grant Halverson and her colleagues have done is they've done research into how people get things done now and what's different from what used to work. So it's a great book. It's a very simple book to read, so you can download the ebook on Kindle. You can read it in an hour, but I'm going to take you through the 9 steps anyway. But I do recommend, if you want a little bit more detail, go and get the book. Okay, so I've grouped them into 3 areas. Now, Dr. Grant Halverson doesn't do this, so she doesn't group them into these 3 areas, but I do. I have here. So we're going to go through them one at a time, but let me give you the overview first. So the first 3 are kind of traditional goal setting stuff. I think you'll find them pretty simple, especially the first 2, and pretty familiar if you've done any sort of goal setting in the past. So I've called that's get ready. Then aim is about planning your progress over the next 90 days. So how are you going to not just set the goal, but plan to achieve the goal? So the other nice thing about a 90-day goal is that when you start, you can create a plan for it as well. And fire, I'm using that metaphorically, is what happens when things catch fire? What happens when things get in the way? What happens when problems occur or obstacles occur along that 90-day path? Okay, so these are the 3 areas we're going to go through: ready, aim, fire, and there's going to be 9 things that we look at. So I want to make this interactive. First of all, I want to make it personal for you. So I'm going to ask you to work on your own 90-day project using these 9 things as we go through them. But also at the end of each bunch of 3, I'll stop and just take some questions or comments as we go. Please feel free to use the question box as we go to type in questions, and I'll read them out at the end of each block of 3 as well. Okay, so let's look at the first block of 3, which is about getting ready. This is setting your goals. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because a lot of this will be familiar to you if you've done any sort of goal setting before, especially the first 2, although the third one might be a little bit new to you. Okay, so the first one is about what kind of goal you're going to set. So if you think about goals as being on these 2 axes, so you could have very vague goals or specific goals. You could have easy goals to achieve or challenging goals to achieve. If I asked you, which of these 4 types of goals are the most motivating, I reckon you'd know pretty quickly. In fact, I'm not even going to ask you a poll, because I reckon you could probably say, if you have a really difficult goal that's vague, you're just going to give up because it's too hard and it wasn't that clear anyway. Similarly, if you have a easy goal that's vague, it's not that you're going to give up, but you're just going to fool yourself that you can achieve it quickly. So if your goal was to lose weight and you lost half a kilogram over a year, you might fool yourself into thinking that you've achieved the goal because it was so vague, just lose weight or make more money, and you make tiny bit more, then you can fool yourself into saying you've achieved it. So what you want are specific goals, but if they're specific and easy, then they're a bit boring. They're boring, they don't motivate you. You might achieve them really quickly, but so what? You don't feel good about it. What you really want, the goals that motivate you, are the ones that are challenging and specific. So you've got a 90-day period to achieve something specific. So make sure that the goal that you've got is a specific goal. So you know, and the way you can tell whether this is a specific goal is you ask yourself at the end of the 90 days, how will I know I've achieved it? Okay, so it might have some numbers attached to it. It might have some, it needs to have an outcome attached to it. So you've got a really specific goal. So for us, the workshop that we've got planned that we're going to offer, it's not just a case of saying, we're going to offer this workshop. We've got a specific goal around how many bookings we want and how much income we want to generate from that in the next 90 days. Okay, so make sure you've got a specific goal. If you've done any sort of goal setting before, this is not a new concept. If you've done SMART goal setting, which I think is, SMART goal setting is a good start. It's not good enough, but the S of SMART is as specific. So make sure you've got your specific goal. The second one, again, this is quite common if you've done any goal setting before, is focus on what you will do rather than what you won't do. So if your goal is to, rather than your goal being, I'm going to spend less time on social media, what are you actually going to do instead? So focus your mind on what you will achieve rather than what you won't achieve. Okay, so make sure that your goal is stated in the positive so that you can move towards it, and that'll become more important when we get to this second set of 3. Okay, the third one is a little bit different. So you may not have come across this concept before, and let me introduce it by a research study that was done. These women who were on a fitness program to lose weight. At the start of the program, researchers asked them, do you think that you'll succeed with this program or not? And they also asked them, do you think that it'll be easy or difficult? And I don't think you'll be surprised to know that at the end, when they had a look at the success of the people who completed the program, the ones who succeeded were the ones who believed that they would succeed, but also didn't think that it was going to be a breeze. They didn't think that they would just breeze through it and get through it easily. So Dr. Grant Halverson and her colleagues call this being a realistic optimist. So be optimistic, in other words, set a stretch goal, otherwise it's boring and it's a yawn, but also be realistic about what might get in the way. So, and that's another nice thing about the 90-day project is you can imagine and you can predict to some extent what might go wrong in the next 90 days. And in fact, there's another process which I teach in my workshop, which is called the pre-mortem. So you know the post-mortem, which is in medicine, in healthcare, when a patient dies, the surgeon and team get together to analyze what went wrong so that it won't happen again. So 2 Harvard researchers created, based on that, the idea of a pre-mortem. So what you do with the pre-mortem is you say, and I'm going to ask you to do this now. So you've got a goal, you know what is specific, so you know what it's like to achieve it. Imagine 3 months from now, if you were sitting down and looking at that goal and you'd failed. So for some reason, you weren't able to achieve the goal. Okay, what went wrong? And if this is a team goal, what you do is actually sit down with your team and do exactly this process. You imagine that you failed. So this is kind of the exact opposite of traditional goal setting. Traditional goal setting says, imagine that you achieve your goal. Imagine that your life's going to be better. You'll be happier, more successful, richer, sexier, better in every way. So the pre-mortem does the opposite, says imagine you failed. Okay, so this is the realistic part of it. But all you're doing is imagining, right? And it's only over 90 days, so you know what are the sort of things that could cause it to fail. And then what you do is in your planning, you put things into place to avoid those obstacles. So when I do this in workshops, people say things like, our goal wasn't clear enough. Okay, make a clearer goal. Another thing that people say is somebody leaves or somebody goes on leave or somebody goes on maternity leave, a key person. So put plans in place for that. And when you're looking 3 months ahead, again, you can manage many of those contingencies. Another one that people say is like, this is a sales goal and nobody wanted to buy the new product. And that might be true of our workshop as well. So what can you do to avoid that problem? Well, you can't force people to buy, but what you can do is make sure that you start offering it to customers very early in the 90 days. You don't want to get 2 months down the track designing this beautiful product that nobody's willing to buy. What you want to do is start soon. So we'll talk about that briefly as well very soon. Okay, so do a pre-mortem on your goal. So those are the first 3 things. Be specific about your goal, know what you will do rather than what you won't do, and be a realistic optimist. So set a stretch goal, but be realistic about what might go wrong. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to give you a minute or so to make some notes for yourself, but also ask me any questions as we go as well. So any questions that you've got related to any of those 3 things, let's address them now. Oh, okay, and I see some other responses from earlier, like what gets wrong in goal setting. So burnt out due to large workload. Yeah, so that's another reason goals weren't achieved. So in fact, if I go back through some of that older feedback, that earlier feedback, so lack of understanding of what I'm trying to achieve, so that's the sort of thing that you can plan for, and you can address that at the start. No permission from management to set innovative goals. So in that case, maybe you're in a position where it's not possible to do that, or you do something, you create some fast, quick wins so that you then get management buy-in for it. Okay, so you'll know the answers to this. And if it's a team goal, especially when you're trying to be a realistic optimist, then involve your team as well. Get them to do the post-mortem. Get them to first buy in and create the specific goal, but then be realistic about what might go wrong, because then they're invested in solving the problems as they occur as well. Okay, let's continue. So now we're going to look at the next three. So I've called this AIM, which is all about now you create your plan. And as I said earlier, the nice thing about a 90-day project is you can break it down into 12 weeks. And you can imagine either an Excel spreadsheet that's shared or a Google Doc where everyone can see what has to be done in each of the weeks. Or you might have a bulletin board up on the wall or a whiteboard where it's mapped out week by week by week. Here's what we need to do each step of the way, each week of the way is pretty clear. You can see in a snapshot, and the human brain is pretty good at being able to get kind of the big picture snapshot of what's involved in, where are we and what's left. Okay, so let's look at these next three areas. The first one here is called Seize the Moment. So again, let me tell you about a research study that was done. This was done at a university in Europe, where they, in the Northern Hemisphere, they have their the university year runs over the Christmas break. So they don't have as long a break for Christmas as we do here in Australia. So what they did was, this study was a lecturer, when their students were going to go off for their mid-year break, which was over Christmas, he said to them, if you'd like to get extra credit for this course, then write an essay about what you did over the Christmas holidays and email it to me 2 days after Christmas. Okay, so they had to do some work over the Christmas holidays while they were away enjoying time with their family and friends. They had to do this bit of extra work if they wanted credit. Now, so what he did was he split the class into two, and half of the students were told, that's all they were told, exactly what I said to you. The other half were told, imagine now when you're going to be writing that essay. So when are you going to be doing it? They didn't have to write it down. They didn't have to put in their calendar. They didn't have to tell him. All they had to do was imagine when it was going to be done. And what he found was the students who actually imagined it in their future were more likely to achieve it, like twice as likely, like 70% versus 30%. Okay, so this thing is, this idea is this concept of what the researchers called seizing the moment. So that means imagining, like actually making time for your goals in the future. So you can imagine when you're going to have, or rather plan, when you're going to have time in the future that you're going to be working on your goals. In other words, set aside time in your calendar when you're going to be working on your goals. So people who do that are more likely to succeed. Now you may go, well, duh, of course that's going to happen. But I reckon if you look at your calendar now, most people's calendars are full of meetings, appointments, going to other people's. Essentially, what they're doing is they're filling their calendar with other people's goals. Okay, so most people don't set aside time in their calendar for working on their own goals. What they do is they have their calendar set up for other people's goals, and then they try to squeeze their own goals around that into the empty places. Don't do that. Respect your goals as much. Okay, so make time for working on your goals. It might be that you say that the first thing you do every morning is spend half an hour working on a goal. It could be when you sit down after lunch, you're going to spend half an hour working on your goals. So it can either be stuck in the calendar as specific time set aside, or it can be, as I've just said then, what's called if-then thinking. So you could have a combination of these two things. So you could have time in your calendar, and you can have if-then thinking. And if-then thinking simply says, if something happens, then I'm going to do something else. In other words, you're creating time for your goals based on triggers that happen in your everyday life. So, for example, if you want your team members to be more innovative, then maybe you have something like this. If it's a weekly staff meeting, we start with I'm calling this innovation insights. Okay, so then it happens automatically. So you don't have to wait for there to be time to work on innovation. it's already scheduled in because it's part of the standard staff meeting. Personal goal, when I wake up, I'll go to the gym. Okay, and it could be that that's a goal that you set for 4 or 5 days a week, whatever you choose, that when you wake up, you'll go to the gym. So it becomes a habit, it becomes a rule. When I get back from lunch, I'll spend 30 minutes on the goal. When I go shopping, I'll start in the fruit and veg aisle rather than the chocolate aisle. So, create rules for yourselves. It says, if this or when this, here's what I'm going to do. Okay, that's the first thing. So it's about seizing the moments that happen throughout the 90 days. The next one is, this is a fairly straightforward one, an obvious one. Know how far, like what progress you're making, and know how much more is to be done to get to your goal. So know what you've got left. So what are you going to be measuring and when? So if you have some sort of revenue goal that you want to generate some business, so if you're a business owner, then are you going to be measuring it weekly? Are you going to be measuring how close you are to the goal? You see the fundraisers where they have those big thermometers showing where they shade in how far they've got towards their goal. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So you've got to be able to have some system of regularly reminding yourself to measure and what are you going to be measuring and how are you going to, when are you going to be doing it, and remind yourself to do it. The next one's a little bit different. So the next one is, if you've got a challenging goal and you don't exactly know how to achieve it, then the researchers say don't only focus on the outcome, also think about the process. So my nephew Riley, he's 17 now, and he's crazy about cricket, and he's a pretty good batsman. And he was getting some cricket coaching a couple of years ago from a really good coach, actually, is Mickey Arthur, who, if you know cricket, he was the South African coach, then the Australian coach. He settled in Perth when he left the Australian coaching job, and he was doing private coaching. So we got some coaching from Mickey for Riley, and I saw Mickey Arthur coaching Riley in the nets one day and just sending balls down to him to hit. And Riley's goal is to bat number 3 for Australia, which actually, it's not well, I think we need a good number 3 batsman at the moment, but his goal is to bat number 3 for Australia. But Mickey didn't talk at all about that. He would send down a ball from the bowling machine, and his coaching would always be, bend your knees, Riley, head over the ball, Riley, close to the bat and pad close together, Riley. So it's all about the process. So he was all about focus on getting better, not being good. So it wasn't about the outcome. He never said, do this and you'll be batting number 3 for Australia, Riley, because it was so far away that it would have been completely meaningless for him to talk about that. So when you've got a challenging goal, don't only think about the outcome, think about the process. And what you're doing is you're measuring progress and not just the outcome. So you may be measuring things like number of phone calls we make, or number of ideas that are generated every week in the staff meeting, or the number of meetings that we are able to secure with potential clients. Okay, so that's what you're looking for there. So how you're going to be measuring and rewarding progress along the way, not just the outcome that we're moving towards. Okay, so there's the next 3, the second set of 3. This is about doing your planning, and the planning you do right at the start when you're setting your goal. So seize the moment, know what's left. So seize the moment, as I said, is schedule time for your goals, and know what's left, which is being able to see how close you are to the outcome, but also if it's a challenging goal and you don't exactly know how to achieve it, look at measuring the process and your progress as well, so getting better. Okay, let me quickly check if there's any questions. Okay, so if you're coming in, I found again, I'll keep this anonymous. I found I visualize my goals and what can get in my way. The problem I have is keeping the habit of staying in my goal. I fight with my mind on it, get more frustrated about it. Do I need to make even smaller goals so I feel I'm gaining momentum? So I would suggest the 90-day goal that you set, it should be realistic. So it's a stretch goal, but it's something that's realistic as well. So don't fall into the trap of making that goal smaller. But what you can do is have smaller sub-goals along the way. So this is exactly what we're talking about here, about focus on getting better, not just being good. So have something that you can measure that's measuring your progress. So it may be that your skills getting better, or you're like kicking more goals, to use a sporting metaphor, on a step-by-step basis, and that's going to lead you towards making progress there and being successful. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions coming in. And by the way, the thing about making your goals too small, that happens a lot. So many people make their goals too small, and so they end up with boring goals, which aren't motivating at all. Okay, so we've got we're going to move into the last three sections, but actually let me do another poll here. This is not so much a poll as a quiz. So this is some research done by Strava. So Strava is like the social media app for fitness. So you can, your Apple Watch and your Fitbit, you can upload your results to Strava. It collects real-time data, and so they did some research based on the data from all their users uploading their fitness routine, and so people can't lie here. So this is, they make a New Year's resolution, but about how, for something like generally losing weight or exercising more, or being healthier. And so Strava sees how often they're active from New Year's on. So Strava doesn't know what the resolution is, but they can see that there's a lot of activity at the start on the 1st of January or 2nd of January, and then it drops off. So they published recently, most people give up their New Year's resolutions by what date? So I'll tell you what the answer is, but let me launch the poll and see if you can guess what the answer was. Okay, so here's the poll coming up. So how long does it take for people to give up their New Year's resolutions? Okay, so most people have voted, and most people got the right answer, which was less than 2 weeks. Yep, so most people got it right. Okay, so most people give up their New Year's resolutions before even 2 weeks have passed by, according to Strava's app, showing how active people are. Okay, so we're not really good at keeping resolutions because the resolutions aren't created as real goals. And that's the problem with resolutions. So they're just, on a drunken New Year's Eve, we'll say, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to get fit, or I'm going to give up smoking, but they haven't gone through a process that will keep them on track. So let's look at these three, and the reason I did this now is because here's what happens when life gets in the way. Okay, and that's typically what happens with most New Year's resolutions. There's people create them with great intent, but fires occur in the 90 days. So here the last three things. So first of all, have grit, don't tempt fate, and then build willpower. Okay, so let's look at those three areas here. So here's an interesting, again, another interesting research study done by researchers in the US. They were asking, why are Asian children smart? And I put that in quotation marks because what they were actually testing was how well their kids do on a test, on an exam. And of course, that's not the only measure of smart, but what they were looking at in this specific case was when children did poorly on an exam, what were the reasons for it? And they actually asked the parents of the local kids, and they asked the parents of kids from an Asian background, when your kids fail at an exam, what was the reason for it? And the American parents, these were their top four reasons. They weren't smart enough, they had bad teachers, they were unlucky, or they didn't try hard enough. When they asked the Asian parents why their kids did badly on an exam, these were their top four answers. They didn't try hard enough, they didn't try hard enough, they didn't try hard enough, or they didn't try hard enough. And coming from an Asian background, I know that was true for us as well. So we were always told, just work harder and you'll succeed. So it's not the only measure of success, but one of the things that researchers find now is people who are successful have this thing which is called persistence, determination, or grit. Okay, so are you a gritty person? Are you able to push through when there are obstacles? And if you are, then you're more likely to achieve your goals. And again, it might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but it shouldn't come as a surprise that the grittier people are the ones who are more likely to succeed. The world expert on grit is Angela Duckworth, and I reckon you should look at a TED Talk or read her book about how to be, if you want to be a grittier person, if you want to be able to have the persistence to push through. There are a couple of other things that you can do, though, that will help you. The next one is being able to avoid temptation, avoid those obstacles. And so the eighth thing that successful people do differently is they avoid temptation. So I'm a bit of a chocoholic. So if there's chocolate around, then there's a good chance that I'll be eating it. So how can you avoid the temptation? For me, it's just don't have chocolate around. Okay, so the researchers call this not tempting fate. So what can you do to create an environment where it's easier to achieve your goal and harder to fall into the bad habits that will stop you from achieving your goal? So just a couple of quick things. So you can go cold turkey. So if you've got a goal that you're distracted by social media, so you want to avoid social media, then what you do is you delete the app from your phone rather than say, oh, I'll only look at Facebook 5 minutes a day, delete the app altogether. So that works for some people. Create a penalty for going off track. So one of my friends, she created this penalty where she had this goal, and at the start of it, she told me what the goal was, and she gave me a check for $1,000. Actually, it wasn't a check written out to me, it was a check written out to her ex-husband, and she said to me that if she didn't achieve the goal, I was to mail that to her ex-husband, and that was enough of a penalty for her to keep her motivated to stay on track. And then make it harder. And again, it's things like just making sure that the environment is conducive to your goal. So Google, one of the experiments that they did was Google has free food, free everything in their offices. So because they measure everything, one of the things they measured was they had these chocolates in a bowl, and people walking by would grab a chocolate and eat it. So that was one version of the experiment. So one version of the experiment, though, there's this chocolate sitting in a bowl. The second version, the same chocolates were wrapped and just in normal chocolate wrapping paper. And people were less likely to eat the chocolate because they couldn't just grab it and chuck it in their mouth. They had to grab it and unwrap it and put it in their mouth. So they were less likely to do it. So even a tiny little nudge like that can work. Okay, I can see a couple of questions coming in. So let me just see what they are. Yeah, okay, so there's a couple which I'll actually I'll address after this last one, actually, because that's good timing. And so the last one is that the research is showing that willpower is like a muscle, just like your physical muscles. The willpower is a muscle as well. And there's some research done in this area that the more you exercise, the more willpower you use in a day, the more likely you are to kind of wear it out. So Barack Obama was famous for wearing the same suit every day, and the same black suit every day, because he said, I've got to make lots of big decisions in the day. This is one that I don't have to make, so I don't want to use up my willpower, my decision-making power on this decision. So he wants to focus on the big things. Other research shows that if you're trying to if people force you to use your willpower early, then you perform worse later in the day when you're asked to exercise your willpower later. So in the context of these 90-day projects, the best thing that you can do when it comes to your willpower is only work on one big goal at a time. So every 90 days, when you have a project that you're working on, make it the only project you're working on. Don't try and go, oh, Gihans did this great webinar about 9 things we should do, so let's do 4 goals in the next 90 days. No, don't do that. So do one big goal. Now, you might start with a goal, try it, find that you're not getting success with it, and then stop it and pick another one. That's okay, but don't try and run these concurrent goals, because it's really testing your effort, your determination, your willpower, and you're better off focusing it just on the one area. Okay, so we've come to the end. So this is the last lot of 3. Let me quickly check questions and see if I can answer some of the questions that have come in. Okay, so the name, the expert on grit, Angela Duckworth. So I'm sure if you just do a Google search for Angela and grit, I'm sure you'll find it, but her name's Duckworth. Okay, here's an interesting comment here. Grit can actually become a problem in that you should change course and explore other solutions and strategies. At what point do you know when to switch? Right, so one of Seth Godin's best books, I think, is a book called The Dip. So it's a little book, it's a tiny little book, and it's got one concept, which is about it's okay to quit. So there's some things that you shouldn't just be gritty and push through. There are times when you should say, I need to let this go. Okay, so I'm not going to answer this question in full, but I would highly recommend that you read Seth Godin's book, The Dip. Because when you're in a dip, should you bail out or should you fight to get out of the dip? And there are times when you should quit and there are times you should keep going. It's a good question, and I reckon it's something that it's really important. So if the goal's worth moving towards and worth fighting for, then grit will help, because the less gritty people will just fall by the wayside. But you absolutely need to make smart decisions when things get tough. Yeah, great. I'm glad the question came up. Any others? Okay, so an interesting perspective on. So David Epstein's book Range is also an interesting perspective on grit. Oh yeah, and I know this. I know the book Range. It's a more recent book. Yeah, that's a good book as well. Great. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's any other questions because the timing's perfect at the moment. Okay, so here's a summary. So if you'd like to take a snapshot of the screen, here's a list of all the 9 things that successful people do differently. I'll keep that up there while I just check if any other questions are coming in. Okay, so just a couple of things before we finish up. Again, if you want the reference to the book, 9 Things Successful People Do Differently by Dr. Heidi Grant Halverson. Great book. Highly recommend reading. It's a very simple read. She's written a couple of other books as well, which are bigger books, and they go into a lot more of the background research. But I think this 9 things is like a little mini book, which just goes through the 9 things that I've just spoken about. As I said earlier, it's not in the same order, so don't go along and have my list and her list, but they're essentially the same 9 things. And it's a really, really interesting read. Okay, so how useful was this? So my last, at the end of this webinar, there'll also be an exit survey which pops up, but I'm going to ask you this as a survey in the webinar itself. So on a scale of 1 to 5, I guess you'll be coming up soon. Okay, so here's a poll on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. How useful is this, or how useful will it be for your future goal setting? Okay, so let's see the results that are coming up. Excellent, so most people have voted. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm pleased, and I hope it's not a surprise to you that the results are pretty high. So great to see that many people find this really useful. Now, here's the thing. Fantastic. So I'm really pleased. So my work here is done. Your work here is just starting. There's a quotation which the first reference to it seems to be in 1882, where this guy said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is. So what I'd really like you to do is make sure that you don't just take these notes and put them away and do nothing with them. Set a 90-day goal for yourself now. So use goal setting, use this process for your own goal setting. Okay, so actually there's a comment here from Kate, which I was just about to address actually. How to use this information when our goal setting process revolves around a 12-month period. So what you do there is you then break it down for yourself into these 90-day projects. So you do these mini projects over this 12-month period. So some organizations have embraced the idea of 90-day projects, and that's all they do. Most still don't, but you can do it yourself, and you can do it yourself personally in your team or in your organization. As I said, if you'd like me to come in and run this program for you, then I'm open about it, because this is my 90-day project as well. It's called the New Rules for High Performance Teams, and what we do, this webinar, the content of this webinar is one of the, I've got 9 modules, and I talk to people, I talk to the leaders in the team about which of these, and typically for a one-day program, we'd pick 6 of the 9. For a half-day program, we'd pick 3 or 4 of them, and we'd go through that. So it's really developing the new skills. So it's talking about what you have to do to succeed in this fast-changing world. And the topics are not just around productivity. There's things around change, resilience, innovation, personal brand, and we pick and choose the ones that will work best for that team. Okay, so just before I finish up, as I said, this webinar is part of the Disruption by Design leadership coaching program that I run. If you're interested in that, and some people here either are part of it or their manager or leaders part of it, then if you're not and you're interested in it, please check it out, futurereadyleaders.today. What we look at are the 3 things that you need to be successful in the future. So foresight, being able to look into the future, harnessing the talent around you, and then taking action. Obviously, today's webinar was all about action. As part of the program, the members of the program get access to me. So for individual coaching, we also run monthly a group coaching session around a topic around productivity. So we've done things around innovation, we've done diversity, and next month I think we might do one around we are going to do another one around innovation and being ready for the future and being able to innovate from the inside out. And then every month I also run one of these team webinars where I teach some skill for your team members, for your staff as well. If you're interested, check it out at futurereadyleaders.today, or when you complete the exit survey, just tick the box that says you're interested in us contacting you about that. Thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you for participating. Great to know that it was really useful for you. As I said, the real value comes when you put it into practice. So good luck with that, and good luck with your 90-day projects and setting your goals for the future. Thanks very much. Bye for now.